Shortly after starting that batch in the first video, I saw the opportunity to make 2 more improvements, and I set up a new tank with those 2 changes. The first is that the back of this tank is painted blue, and young from previous batches hatched in this tank seem less stressed and more inclined to swim out in the open. But the second change, and the most important, is that this tank is on a central sump where water can be trickled in gradually with little disruption to the new fry. You might not think that's a big deal, but introducing as little disruption as possible to the new fry does seem to produce better batches. However, I had not used this tank with the new breeding setup. The females adjusted quickly to this setup, and it appears to be a comfortable environment for them, providing security, and now up to 70% water changes can be done with seasoned water gradually, with less disruption when there are new fry. Starting off with a group of females that are hiding in the plants, particularly when males are introduced right away, often results in fish getting injured and your spawns being smaller. I learned after the first couple of batches that when hatched in a normally filled aquarium, up to 50% of the fry could be belly sliders. The air bladder needs to develop as the fish grows out in shallower water, and I have found that maintaining 4 inches or less for the first week at least provides the best results. The water level is then gradually raised as the fish grow out. I used to increase the water level steadily to both develop their air bladders and to provide more water area for them as they grew. Over time, it became clear that when raised in 4 to 6 inches of water, their air bladders developed just fine. So for a while, I kept the new batches in 6-inch water until well into their 2nd and 3rd week. I used to increase the water level steadily to both develop their air bladders and provide more water area for them as they grew. Over time, it became clear that when raised in 4 to 6 inches of water, their air bladders developed just fine, and the fish did well when the water level was raised as long as the change was gradual. Keep a close eye on them, and if you see individuals that struggle to swim up into the aquarium, struggling to swim up and then falling back to the bottom, you have added water too quickly, and the water level should be lowered. When you have fish that are belly sliders, you can put them in a net breeder hung from the top of an aquarium where they are in just 3 or 4 inches of water. Over a period of time, up to half may recover, but I have found that it takes at least a month. When first starting them off, I'll feed either vinegar eels or paramecium at every feeding, and stop feeding the paramecium by day 4 or 5. I then feed vinegar eels in the morning and the night, and either paramecium or a dry food in the afternoon. You can put the dry food feeding at the end of the day to lessen your chances of the water becoming cloudy overnight. Brine shrimp is gradually introduced and vinegar eels reduced, starting when the fish are 6 to 7 days old, and then vinegar eels are no longer fed, generally by the beginning of the 3rd week. From having hatched fry now using these plates a number of times, it seems best to remove the plates soon after the fry are free swimming well enough to not get removed when you pull the plates out or get injured. Recently I've been sticking my hand into these new fry tanks when they're at a much younger age than I would have disturbed them before, and I haven't seemed to be doing any damage. I'm doing this only the 3rd day after the adults are removed, so the fry are still extremely small, though they're off their yolk sac and free swimming. I move very slowly and deliberately, hopefully in a manner that scares them away. Once all the strips are removed, I'll wait a few minutes for everything to settle down before removing the plates. Pulling these up will release a lot of debris, so we'll need to do a substantial water change after everything is removed. You don't want to remove any of this debris yet. The infusoria produced from the duckweed is primarily for the first 1 to 3 days, when the new young are dependent on that infusoria in combination with any vinegar eels or paramecium you may also be feeding. There's a great temptation to want to clean the tank up now that you can see that the fry have hatched, but the only way you can boost their water quality now is through adding clean water to what they are in and draining from the other side of the tank back down to the water level where they should be. I've tried many times to turkey baste or clean the bottom of these new tanks at this point, and you simply can't avoid sucking up and killing a few fry in the process. Here is a tank from the first video, and the strips have just been removed, and by looking underneath you can see that the new fry have this great area to feed on infusoria where water can move across the bottom and give them the best possible start during their first 2 days. After the plates are removed, I've left the bottom in for another 2 or 3 days in the past, as the new fry like to stay underneath it in the dark, but in this case, for cleanliness, I'm going to go ahead and remove it. Once everything is taken out and the water is totally stirred up, is not the time to start looking for fry with a flashlight. I know that's the first thing you want to do, but I say this because I have never been encouraged by what I have seen at this point. Even in a bare-bottom tank, it's amazing how well the fry can hide when they think things are unsafe. So what you do is, once the plates are removed, change about 70% of the water, and then wait until the next feeding. In that time, the debris will have settled and the fry will find where they feel safe. At the next feeding, the water will then be clear, and when you put in the vinegar eels, the fry then somehow magically appear from everywhere, and you can see them again and get an idea of how large your batch is. Doing the feedings and water changes is a pain in the butt. But the good news is that it only lasts 3 to 4 weeks, and around then you can start dropping the late night feeding. Until then, these tiny fry simply do not do well when going more than roughly 12 hours between feedings. And as a result of your efforts, at 1 month, you will have 200 to 300 young Odessa Barbs that can then be split up into their own tanks, ready for regular feeding and water change schedule. Feedings are done here between 8 and 9 a.m., 2:30 to 3:30 p.m., and 9 to 10 p.m. Lights are on 24/7. Lately, I've been changing 70 to 80% of the water after feedings, in part to avoid bacterial blooms, and that has worked out great. I figure that with 70% water changes 3 times per day, the difference in water quality with each change is not an issue to be concerned about. I will either bring the water level up and then bring it back down, or drain it down really low with particularly new fry, and then just bring the water level back up as is being done here. This is the new tank with the trickle fill coming in from a sump. To show how quickly and easily the 3 times per day feeding and water change process can be done, here's a quick video of me doing a feeding of vinegar eels and a water change on a group of Odessa fry started in the last video. Now when you're doing this and you're feeling pretty good that everything is going well, there's always one thing lurking in the background during the first 2.5 to 3 weeks, and that is that a bacterial bloom may occur because the amount of organic material in the tank becomes too much for the nitrifying bacteria in the tank to digest. The deteriorating organic debris produces ammonia, which is then consumed by bacteria that will use up the available oxygen in the tank, and this will kill the fry. When you are dealing with low amounts of water, high amounts of food, and many fast-growing fry, a cloudiness episode that will kill the fish is always a possibility. But it is easily remedied. This tank is just beginning to develop a bacterial bloom. The severity is in proportion to how cloudy the water is. The bacterial bloom in this tank has just begun, and when you see it starting, it will never get better. Now here is the same tank immediately after a 50% water change. I don't know how well the camera will pick it up, but this is the clarity that you want to see. You can often see cloudiness starting approximately 2 hours after a feeding. Then you will need to do a 50% water change when first noticed. I have found that in spite of my best efforts, I will usually experience 2 or 3 episodes of cloudy water during each batch. So for the first 3 weeks, I will check in on the tank about 90 minutes after each feeding to make sure that the water has not begun to become cloudy. That has saved me many batches. I would also choose to do the dry food feedings as the last feeding at the end of the day, or feed the vinegar eels in a reduced portion to lessen the possibility of water becoming cloudy overnight. After a few times of this, you'll develop quite the eye for the most subtle shades of cloudiness in the water. Some may think that this sounds like an easy problem to solve through improvement of one variable or another. Feed less, put in more aeration, do more water changes. But your water staying clear is a balance between the amount and type of food you are feeding, the size and the number of the fry at the time, the depth and the quality of the water, and whether you're using live plants. Live plants are important as they absorb ammonia They culture infusoria and they contribute to avoiding cloudiness through maintenance of a healthy biological environment. So to some extent, they can help slow down cloudiness episodes, though they still seem to occur. By 3 or 4 hours after feeding, with a healthy bacterial bloom in process, you will find that the water may have declined enough that you will start seeing losses. When it happens, they rarely die right away, but you will just see a large reduction in the number of your fry by the next morning. With the amount of food being put into the aquarium, you'll develop a layer of mulm on the bottom that must be cleaned or you will experience losses over time with your fry. So this is how I do it, and if you move slowly and deliberately enough, you shouldn't damage any fry. After I have separated the mulm from the bottom of the tank, I let the debris fall to the bottom where it can be sucked up with a turkey baster. I then empty the turkey baster into a separate container, as there will always be young caught up and I can generally catch them with the turkey baster to put them back. The problem with the Odessa Barbs, of course, is that the males don't begin to develop that red stripe until they're 5 to 6 months old, and it doesn't firmly set until they're about 8 months old. Until roughly the 5th month, the sexes are identical. At selectaquatics, they're sold in groups of 6 2 to 4 month old unsexed, and I'll always send 1 or 2 extras. The earliest they can be shipped is at about 6 to 7 weeks, and the smaller fish handle shipping better than the larger fish do. They do generally sex out at about 50-50 males to females. If you are able to obtain this line of the Odessa Barbs, please consider breeding them so that they are not lost from the hobby. Thank you for watching this latest video on breeding the Odessa Barbs. Now, if you're going to breed the barbs, tetras, danios, rasboras, and the various types of fish that will breed using this method, make sure to write down what you're doing. And when it doesn't go well, then you can go back and make changes and come up with a version written down on how to do it successfully and how it worked for you. And then share it with other fish keepers. This information doesn't get out. A lot of the breeding books that you see in fish stores don't contain the information that's in this video, and they don't really tell you a lot of times exactly what you really need to know. So the only way this information gets passed on is if you do it and write it down and pass it on. So thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've got any questions or concerns, certainly email me at selectaquatics@gmail.com. And by the way, you'll be seeing more of me over the upcoming months. I've got a lot of plans for more YouTube things coming up. And one of the things I'll be doing more of in the future is answering people's questions again. So if you've got issues or questions that you'd like to have answered, I'll be more than happy to get back with you with an answer and possibly keep it for a future video. Thank you very much.